Welcome everybody, this is the Mainframe. I'm Tony Clark. I'm here with my co-host Chris Garrett. In the first episode, we talked about how we grew to an 8-figure company using the minimal viable product. We went into more detail about that in episode 2. Now in this episode, we're focused on the next step in that process, and it's a big one. Why do launches fail?
If you're asking me in particular why launches fail, it's because I'm scared to death of them. And I think a lot of people are like that. When it comes to selling, a lot of us think people are going to hate us because I'm asking for money. Sonia tells the story of getting up on stage at a big event where everybody expected sales pitches, and she started by apologizing. And afterwards, when she got down off stage, people were telling her off, saying, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't apologize for having something to sell. And we know that the rational part of us, we're selling something that's going to help people and it's good and it works, but we still feel afraid. So one of the big reasons why launches fail is we're just afraid of it.
And no matter how confident you are in what it is you're offering, there's still that trepidation in the back of your head about having to sell it. And is it something that people will want? Which carries us to our second reason that a lot of launches fail, is a product that somebody doesn't want. That's because the research wasn't done beforehand. A product was built and then tried to be sold or marketed versus building something for a specific audience.
I always say you can have very little confidence in yourself, but have confidence in your value, confidence in your knowledge and your experience and the service you deliver. I'm always nervous when I'm giving public talks. I focus on the content, and with your product, you can do the same. You can focus and have confidence in your product, your service, the delivery and the outcome, because you've had that audience who has told you what they want, and you've built a product which delivers what they want. So you should have more confidence.
That's a great way of looking at it. So if you're an introvert with not much of an ego, you might actually have a better shot at doing this because you can focus 100% on the product instead of on yourself.
There's something to be said for humility, and not just from a marketing point of view, because people really do resonate with that, but also if you're transparently and authentically building something as a solution, then it will work better. We know we're building something people want and need because they're telling us.
Which is really the first step of the pre-sale, is preparing your audience. The idea is you start generating buzz without making it a hard sell. And one example of that we see a lot now, which is common, is the teaser trailer. We talk about this a lot.
Oh, we love these.
Hell yeah. I remember the teaser trailer for Star Wars Episode 7 dropped on Thanksgiving, and I took time away from my family and friends to sit and wait for this trailer to drop. And it was a teaser trailer. It wasn't even a full trailer.
Just shows your priorities, Tony. You're sat there refresh.
Exactly. But that's a great example of how Disney has done this. They've done it with Marvel. They've done it with the Star Wars properties, really catering to that audience, getting them warmed up and excited about something way far enough in advance. There are people actually planning their schedule around movies that aren't even going to be released for years because they're such fans, and this early warm-up, this early excitement has already started to build. And that's a key part of a launch, getting people excited about what's coming. You say this often, I'll let you go into detail, is that people buy before they buy. Well, what does that mean?
What that means to me is that you decide to buy something before you get your credit card out. And if you're given the opportunity to warm up to the idea and to fully understand the benefit or even the future pleasure of a purchase, you don't just buy, but you buy with confidence. And just think about this in terms of your own behavior. Would you buy a car on impulse? Most of us probably would. And even a laptop, there's debates going on about the new Apple MacBook and saying, oh, it's terrible or it's gorgeous. And everybody's discussing it. Chances are, if you're going to buy a laptop, you're going to do a little bit of research. And if you can do the pre-sale correctly, at the very least, you have established in people's minds what the benefit or outcome or solution is, what the problem you're solving is. And a lot of the time, people need to be given a little bit of information about a problem, even a problem they have self-identified, to say, okay, this is bad and it's not going to get any better by putting it off. But then when you give people a vision of the future, the other side of the purchase and implementing the purchase, then they can imagine ownership. They've got time for it to settle in and ferment in their minds, and then they're ready to buy. So not only do you sell more because people understand what it is that you're selling, but also you get fewer refunds because people have gone in with confidence. It's not been an impulse purchase. It's not been a pressured purchase. They've actually gone in happy and excited.
And that's the key part of this whole warm-up process, is presenting the opportunity to solve a problem, which you've already identified using the steps we covered in the first two podcasts. You already know that your product will solve this problem. The warm-up is to start getting people thinking about the fact that they have the problem and that you are offering a solution to that problem. What we're really talking about here is developing a narrative and an overarching story. The hero's journey is an example of taking people from where they are now to where they will be with the solution you're going to be offering. And the pre-sell part, the warm-up part, is really about getting them thinking about being that buyer, being that hero in that journey, coming from this problem area to the result that you're going to be providing.
And the trick is to deliver the right information at the right time. And we've all seen this where people have tried too hard and over-delivered. Sonia and I have done webinars before where we've given people 90 minutes of solid information, and people have felt like they didn't need to buy anything afterwards. They went away saying, I can't believe you gave all that away for free.
Yeah.
It's like they already feel like they made the purchase, but they didn't spend any money because I'm completely satisfied. I'm full up. I don't need it. Or this is even worse. People over-deliver in the wrong information. And one of the big criticisms I have of the Game of Thrones books, the Song of Ice and Fire books, is it'll spend 20 pages describing the oils dripping down the chin of the guy that's eating the turkey leg. I don't need to read that. I skip all of that. It's like, you're giving me a lot of information, but it's not value.
Right. Or you're giving the wrong kind of information or changing the narrative halfway through. An important part of a launch is making sure your narrative stays focused on the right things at the right time. And you do that through engaging with your audience and getting their feedback through that process.
And what you should always do with a hero's journey is talk about adversity and talk about the problems. What did you overcome? A hero's journey where everything goes right is not only boring, it feels unrealistic. You've got that second act where everything goes wrong. You need to use it. I'm not saying make things up, but draw from your actual experience. And this is another warning. If you do make things up, people will find out and they will call you on it.
Yeah, that's true. That goes back to the narrative. See, this part of the launch, this pre-launch period, is actually my favorite part because you can really tell the story of the solution you're offering. And if you're really confident in the solution, you can deliver the story in a way that really gets people pumped up without overselling.
Yeah, and if you build it around reality, then you've got a lot to draw on, but also you can say, this is where I was, this is what I had to overcome, this is where I am now. You can be honest. And that hero's journey kind of case study works really well with customers as well. So once you've got through that first launch, if you do it the MVP way, they could be very engaged and they're going to give you those testimonials and case studies. They're going to be excited to tell you the results because they're so engaged and they're so connected with you. And that connection is where you're going to get all of that feedback. But if you tell people this is what to expect, if you give people a roadmap and say, I'm not going to go into detail in each stage, but this is what you have to do, this is what you have to implement to get the best results, then people know what they're getting, they know what to expect. You're not giving people a shopping list. You're not saying, this is what my solution includes, 300 pages, 40 hours of video. What you're saying is, these are the stages. And that's a very different thing. And it gives people context.
And that roadmap leads into the next kind of step of your pre-launch period where they can start engaging with you and offering their objections, which you're going to overcome in your copy, both in the launch and continuing through the pre-launch process.
If you don't do the engagement at this stage, they're still going to give you their objections, but they're going to give you it mid-launch when you're trying to sell the thing. And it'll be a distraction. You wouldn't be able to course correct as well. So doing it in the pre-launch phase, when you're warming people up and when you're testing bits of content and when you're testing messages, getting the objections and the questions then allows you to fold it all into the marketing and into the message. You will see us actually course correct when we're doing a launch, when we're doing a promotion. You can actually see us changing headlines. It works during the launch, but if you have all of that information and you have that confidence that you're on the right track, the launch will go much better because of your pre-sale.
a lot of times they're not direct objections. They're questions, they're concerns people have. So you're not necessarily going to get somebody that says, that sounds ridiculous, or this isn't going to solve my problem. It's more of a question, will it do this or will it do that? And that you can use as a way of modifying your copy to better answer those objections, those questions, both in the pre-launch and preparing for your launch copy.
And always have the confidence to say, perhaps this isn't for you. You're not going to develop something that's perfect for the whole world. Sonia talks about skincare manufacturers saying this is for anybody with skin. That's ridiculous. You're not going to be able to help everybody. So you do need to focus on the people you can best help. And sometimes people fall outside of that, and that's fine. The new MacBook is a perfect example. People saying, why does anybody need a gold laptop? Then it's not for you. That's fine.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because one of the things that you'll find is that there's a difference between objections or concerns or legitimate questions, and then people that are just not your customer. Sometimes they're trying to justify the fact that they're not your customer by using objections in a way that may be combative, because they're really trying to justify their own position. And by taking a position of this might not be for you, you lessen that.
How many times have you seen the whole conversation get derailed because mine is better than yours? My previous purchase has to be better than this new thing because otherwise I'm going to feel bad about my decision. Apple versus Windows, iPhone versus Android, Commodore 64 versus Spectrum versus Atari ST, Marvel versus DC. We could go on forever. But a lot of the time it's just my ego will not allow me to accept that there is another choice. Therefore I have to bash this one. I was at a user group meeting for a 3D CAD system and I was very excited. And one guy just derailed the whole conversation because his objection was about the category of solution, not the specific solution. He didn't agree that it should run in the browser and therefore everybody had to listen to all his expertise for an hour. So I left. And that is one thing you have to look out for. Don't focus on those people. Being a person who lacks confidence and I'm shy and introverted, I focus on the negative people and they can ruin my day with one comment. But don't focus on those people. They're not your customer.
Right. And that's what we were saying earlier. There's a difference between an objection or concern versus somebody who really just wants it to make it all about them. And that's the important thing to look at. Engagement is what really will help identify that.
And if you've got an engaged audience, often they'll come to your rescue. That's another good reason to develop your strategy in this way, because you're bringing friends along. You're going to have people who can stand in front of you and say, hang on, don't be a jerk. The legitimate objections you're going to get are things like price objection. That's something everybody thinks about. Another one to consider having an answer for is, okay, it looks like this will work, but will it work for me, my specific situation, my type of problem? I'm a small business or I'm a one-person business. And so you need an answer for that because it's a legitimate concern, especially if it's a lot of money to spend. So they're not saying, I don't believe you. They're saying, I believe it works in that situation, but I've got a different situation. You need to have a way for them to connect with the people who you have helped before or the people who are currently going through this process with you. So it's another good reason for engagement, but it's also a really good reason for that social proof. So they can see the faces and the names and the businesses of the people who are also in this pre-launch going into the launch.
Yeah, and you do that through testimonials, comments on things. You can look at the fans of your existing work. If this is your first launch, you're not going to have a lot of that to build off of. So you can build a smaller part of your community that can be that evangelical team, that group that will help cement that social proof. Then later on, that's another great reason to do pilot launches because you get that core group that will provide testimonials and also provide feedback. And they're the ones who've already demonstrated that it works for them.
And it's a counterintuitive reason to actually restrict the numbers in this first pilot release, because as that number ticks down, that's further social proof. Somebody who does this very well is Sean DeSouza over at Psychotactics, and he sells out his courses well in advance because he gets people to join a waiting list. And then when that waiting list is filled up, nobody else can join. So when he opens the course, it sells out because his waiting list has sold out all the seats that he needs to sell. And people can see that in his forum. They can see people saying, yep, I'm in, I'm joining, add me to the list. And everybody says, oh, there was 12 seats. Now there's 10 seats. Gosh, there's 9 seats. Maybe I need to get on this thing.
Yeah. The waiting list is the third most important part of a pre-launch period, because this becomes another step in the funnel, and you're getting people who are really interested at this point. And you could even further refine your waiting list by providing an early bird list after that. But the idea is exactly what you're saying. It works in two areas. It works on the social proof because it's now demonstrating that if you're not on this list, I can't even offer you a spot. But it also gives you an indication of what the buildup and excitement has been by how many people are on the list.
People always ask us, how do I know when to launch? How do I know when my minimum viable audience actually is translated into an audience that's big enough to sell? And it's the waiting list. That gives you the idea of, okay, you're not going to sell to every single person on this waiting list because people are in there out of curiosity. They might be competitive. If you've got a good number of people on that waiting list and it's much more than the number of seats you want to sell, you're ready to launch.
Yeah. And that's the idea of a landing page with the early introductory pre-launch copy and an opt-in form as one of your most powerful weapons in your launch. It's one of those things that people tend to forget about, or they just put up an opt-in page. They don't realize how critical this waiting list is to the whole overall process of the pre-sale and eventually your launch.
And also your future launches, because you're going to want to have that waiting list fill up after your first launch.
One of the things that the waiting list also does is a way for you to deliver additional content and to get additional feedback. It becomes a small, almost focus group, or a large focus group, depending on how big you make your waiting list, of serious buyers. Because what you're trying to do is create this serious buyers only mentality.
And it doesn't annoy all the other people that are maybe not ready for this. So your serious buyers are in one list, and all the people who are not interested at all are over on your blog list, your podcast list, whatever. And you're not distracting them. You're not annoying them because you're only sending these emails to the people who've said, I am ready to hear about this and who are interested. They've elected to hear this marketing material. So a lot of times we don't want to launch or sell something because we don't want to annoy our blog audience. We don't want to drive them away with our sales messages. This is a good way of not doing that. You can get people onto the waiting list in your blog posts, in your emails with call to actions. They're low key, they're not annoying. You've given people justification for that. And then the actual marketing messages go to the waiting list, the launch list, and nobody else even sees them. So they don't get annoyed at all.
And that leads into where you start taking that list and using it in your next phase, which is launching, which we will cover in the next episode. Chris, sum up what we've talked about today.
Prepare your audience. Tell them the problem you're solving. Talk about the problem. Talk about how it feels to have the problem. Talk about the solution. So give the people an idea that there's a solution out there and warm them up. And especially if you have a valid hero's journey, and again, we have to have the confidence in ourselves that we have something to share. Talk about that hero's journey and the roadmap to the solution. Don't give all the solution, don't give all the details, but tell people what to expect and the stages to go through. Then moving to phase 2, which is answering objections. Find out what people's objections are. What is their resistance to buying? So when you do open your shopping cart, you've answered as many of these questions as you can in your copy, in your sales materials, in your launch phases. Finally, build a waiting list. The waiting list will tell you how many people are ready to buy, and it will give you a channel to communicate with, which will not annoy the rest of your audience.
Cool. So in the next episode, we'll go into the launch and how this carries over into it. Until our next episode, thank you for listening.